So we're going to start with this activity called plus minus null. And if you've been in this area, in this field for a while, or if you've studied with anybody who, is a pioneer in this field, like Janet Bennett, or Meg Vandenberg, or someone like that, you probably were exposed to an activity called DIE, Describe, Interpret, and Evaluate. It's classic. It's really effective at fostering openness and perspective taking. This is kind of a different take on that activity. There are lots of other alternatives to the DIE, and so we've listed a few here, the DAE, the DIVE, the iDive, all sort of related tools that have similar purposes, just a little bit different approach. And so you can check those out in the Hubicle. But with that introduction, I think we should try it. So when we do plus minus null, the basic idea is that we're trying to get people to gauge how they're interpreting a situation, an event, an interaction, something that they are experiencing, and try to determine whether or not their sort of gut reaction to that is positive, negative, or neutral. And then to get them to sort of imagine and explore other possible interpretations by deviating to the other potential options there. So if they start with positive, then they should try to imagine a negative interpretation and evaluation, or a neutral interpretation evaluation. So just to be clear, if you remember the DIE premise, we would describe something that we're experiencing, interpret it, and evaluate it. And those are three different things. So description is just the facts, ma'am, right? Interpretation is the meaning that we're assigning to that. And evaluation is the valence of it, whether it's positive or negative, and sort of what our judgment of it is. So this is really getting more at the interpretation and evaluation and not focusing so much on the description piece of it. But it is really encouraging that imaginative approach to perspective taking. Okay, so let's try it out. I'm going to show a picture to everybody, and then I've got some things that I want you to do. If everybody would find your reaction buttons now, that would be really helpful before I share this picture, because as soon as I show you the picture and then take it away, I'm going to ask people to use your reaction buttons to either give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or nothing at all. And that's going to signify, so if I show all the videos on the screen, we should be able to see kind of a gauge the room, kind of a feel for how people are interpreting this picture, and whether that's giving them a positive, a negative, or a neutral evaluation. So if you'll find the button on your Zoom controls somewhere where it says reactions, you should be able to see those thumbs up, thumb down, okay? And then also find your chat button, because I'm also going to ask you to type in what you think is actually happening in this picture. So that's the interpretation piece. The thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral is the evaluation piece, and the typing to chat is the interpretation. Okay, so here we go. Here is your picture. Okay, so just take a second, glance at it. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do, and I actually can't see the cameras on my screen because I'm sharing my slideshow, so I'm going to ask Harain to just keep an eye on the videos and get a sense, read the room and see what the sort of balance is between positive, negative, and neutral here. So use your reaction buttons and go ahead and indicate if you had a positive reaction to that, a negative reaction to that, or just kind of a neutral, no strong emotions attached, okay? And I'll show you the picture again while you're doing that.
Good mix of positive and negative, very few neutral I'm seeing.
So a mix of positive and negative. Great. Okay. Great. I can't decide if she's dancing or being mugged. Yes. So go ahead now and type. What do you think is actually happening in this picture? Put your assigning of meaning, interpret what it is that you're seeing here. And of course, we understand, hopefully everybody understands that our interpretation is very influenced by our past experiences and the cultural lenses that we're looking through. All right, so we see lots of dancing. We've got some holding hands. We've got some different interpretations of the facial expression, maybe. We've got, yeah, somebody grabbing her purse. Yeah, she's being helped. I love it, running to avoid the paparazzi. Great. So we're going to put on sort of a teacher's hat now and do sort of a meta level debriefing because, and you can take this and make it a really complex, hour-long activity if you want to and get really involved. But, oh, sorry, I wanted to show you something first here. So before we get into the debriefing, I just want to add one more little element to it. So like I just said, you can make this really complex and think about all the different contextual factors that might influence people's interpretations, right? So this is just a video that has the same imagery, but with 3 different soundtracks. And so if you can imagine, if we look back at that picture that you were looking at before, and it had these 3 separate soundtracks, how would you maybe perhaps change your interpretation and evaluation? Okay. So let's do a sound check. Can everybody actually hear that? All right, so that's the first one. Or if it's just, or if it's different music. Okay, so I'm going to go back again to the picture here. If we had sort of happy music or just the natural soundtrack of what's happening, and again, that could be very different if she were dancing or if she were being mugged, right? Or if she's hiding from the paparazzi or any of the other explanations that y'all put up there. Or if there was this sort of more eerie soundtrack, how might that shape your interpretation and evaluation? And I'm curious in this point, if you would, again, with your teacher's hat on, if you would brainstorm with me what other potential factors might be influencing your interpretation and evaluation. Right, we can't see her face, so it's inherently ambiguous. We can read her posture, we can have kind of the ambiance of whatever else is happening in the picture, but one of our big cues with her facial expression is mostly hidden. So our own gender. These are some really great comments coming up in here. So our age, our gender, these things that have shaped our past experiences are probably really coloring how we see this. Oh, I really love this. So observer's emotional state. Like if I'm in a different mood when I look at this picture, as opposed to a different time when I look at this picture, it could really shape how I'm seeing it, interpreting it. Excellent. Yes, past trauma. Oh yeah, good. If we could see more of the background, it's blacked out for the most part, right? Which again could be shaping it, like a daylight versus nighttime could have a very different feel. Yeah, very good. Excellent. Just the fact the picture is in black and white and not in color makes it feel sort of like old, right? Which may have, again, different evaluations for different people. Excellent. Right, if these were people that we recognized, or if we could see the people on either side of her to get more information about what's going on. These are all really great thoughts. Thank you for contributing. Okay, so I'm going to go to this debriefing now. Where did it go?
I think it was a skip slide. Huh.
Oh, no. Okay, I'll go with this one. Okay, so let me do just a quick debriefing with this. So one advantage to me to doing the DIE activity is that it really gets people to understand that when they are reacting to events, all of that is mixed up together and they're not consciously separating them. And so anytime they describe something, becomes very obvious that actually their interpretation and evaluation is embedded in that description. But to me, the advantage of this plus minus null is that it really gets you to focus on not just recognizing your interpretation and evaluation, but realizing how many other potential interpretations and evaluations that there are. Okay. So as part of this debriefing, I want you to just take a moment and reflect. And if your initial interpretation was positive or negative or neutral, I want you now to actively, take those other perspectives. And then we're going to talk sort of at a meta level about how challenging or easy that was for you. Okay. So you can scroll back through the chat if you want some ideas about what other alternative interpretations there are beyond your initial gut instinct, or you can sit there and imagine more for yourself. But just take a moment to do that reflection, and then I'm going to ask you to reflect again in chat.
Chris, if you could just briefly repeat the question and I'll type it in chat just so for some people who missed it.
Yes. So what I'm asking to reflect on is how easy or challenging it is to do this imaginative perspective taking and really feel the validity of these other possible interpretations beyond your initial gut reaction to it. So when you're ready, you can go ahead and type into chat any answers that you have to that question. And as a follow-up to that question, as you're thinking about how easy or challenging that perspective taking was for you with this particular picture, I want you to think about what could be more challenging with an activity like this. In other words, are there contexts in which you could apply plus minus null as a framework that would really get people to recognize that there are other ways of experiencing something that they just experienced? Yeah, it is amazing how our first impression gets stuck in our head, right? Interesting point. I think it is easier to go from neutral to positive and negative. It might be more challenging sometimes to go from a very strong emotional reaction to the opposite. So maybe if you're positive, it's not so terrible to go to neutral, but it might be difficult to go to negative and vice versa. So negative might be okay to go to neutral, but hard to go to positive. Really good insight in the chat here. Thanks for contributing. So ideas about applications of an activity like this where you're something is inherently more challenging. Like the thing that comes to mind for me is you watch a political speech in our current climate, right? And you have an immediate gut reaction that's very positive or very negative. How challenging would that be to come up with those alternate interpretations and grant them validity? If you have a very positive or a very negative experience in a new cultural context, how does this framework address the challenge of perspective taking there? Yeah, really good point too in the chat about the ambiguity of the situation because it is very ambiguous. And so maybe it's easier to do the perspective taking when we are pretty sure we think what has happened. Maybe this is more challenging. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So if we recognize an image or we see something that we think we really have a handle on, we have the right interpretation of, then we're really sold on our evaluation of it, right? And so the interpretation and evaluation is really tied together in order to um, choose a different evaluation to go, for example, from negative to positive or vice versa. We actually have to let go of our interpretation as well and come up with other possible interpretations. Yes, and when you're involved and not just an observer. Excellent points. I see some requests in the chat to know what was happening in the photo. And typically when I do DIE or plus minus null, I refuse to tell people what the real answer is because then people get caught up in trying to be accurate when actually the point of activity is to try to get multiple perspectives and recognize the validity of all of them. So I try to stay away from answering that question.
And I'll just add one thing to that. So if we think back to the definition of openness, intercultural openness, this activity focused on that second piece, sort of the suspending judgment. And as Chris said, if you do reveal the answer at that point, the related construct also, tolerance for ambiguity, it's going to be a bit uncomfortable. And so we're putting you in a state of discomfort here. But it's really part of it. And it's good to ask, but I'd say leaving it open allows people to actually develop the capacity to see those different perspectives, to suspend judgment. I think Sandra had a comment in the chat about just forcing yourself to interpret the situation in another way, considering all the different possibilities that exist. And it's an attitude, it's something that we develop over time. And so the more of these situations that you can expose people to, students, learners in a training, will help them to develop that capacity. So I'm with Chris. We're gonna hold off on the. You can make up as many scenarios.
Yeah.